Hey everybody, I've been meaning to do a short little talk on this for a while. Since the show came out, it's been getting more and more feedback, which I really appreciate. The last couple weeks have seen traffic on the page and on the show that is growing exponentially, which means probably there is an increased interest in some of the topics. People are starting to hear about the show. All of those things are awesome. With that, though, comes oftentimes a maturing of subject matter that is starting to happen on this show, and as was promised from the very beginning. So you might wonder why I would need to address such a thing as, this is a choir podcast. It is not a political podcast. Any topic to me is fair game, because if you are approaching it in good faith with someone who also is approaching the topic with good faith, in good faith, then I think that we should, as adult, mature human professionals, be able to talk about anything without getting our blood pressure up. I think that's a really important skill. So this show, as promised from the beginning, did not set out to be a nuts and bolts focused show. I will occasionally approach the how-to episodes. I'm planning an episode on literacy this summer when I have more time, when school's out, on teaching literacy. I haven't done it yet because that episode will be more complicated than just me sitting and staring at a camera and a microphone and talking. I'm going to include some demonstrations and some materials that will go along with that episode. That will be very much a how-to. It will be very much safe enough that it could exist at a conference as an interest session. However, that is not the main goal of this project. When I set out to do this project, I was thinking about talking about the philosophy of choral music, which, in doing that, anytime you start to talk about a philosophy, you run the risk of your philosophy not being the same as someone else's, at which point a conversation has to ensue. And that was the point. That is the point, and that will continue to be the point. I think talking about elephants in the room within our profession is important. I think we should do it, and I think we should do it more. And there are very few venues that achieve this in a way that is civil and open, meaning the conversations are two-sided. They are contemptless, meaning people approaching the opposing point of view with the assumption of good faith. So if a discussion topic elicits no contention at all, meaning if I start talking about something that is so benign that nobody would disagree, well then I think we are at a place where the show wouldn't be challenging anyone, and it wouldn't be challenging me, and therefore I wouldn't be interested in doing it, and I don't think the listener would either. I think deep down no listener wants to listen to stuff that is so safe that it doesn't cause them to rethink something. And as a host of the show, I'm hoping to have conversations with guests also that challenge me. So that is ultimately what I hope to provide through this platform. My goal is to promote a culture where open inquiry, the pursuit of greater understanding and support for each other as colleagues, becomes normal. That's what I'd like to see. My hope and my dream is to be the old guy at the conventions, right? Who's been there since the very beginning in Missouri. That's our one of our favorite things to do is hear stories from some of the original members of our chapter, and I always look forward to that, not in the sense that I want to rush through my life, but I think about what do I want the convention culture to be like? What do I want our collegial culture to be like when I reach that age? And so part of what I think about being a human is that we leave the place a little bit better than we found it. And one of the things that I think we could do is trying to work through and conquer as a profession what I see as kind of a culture of fear on social media and in academia that causes many to just keep their opinions to themselves because they think they might be accused of wrong think in some way. I think this is dangerous to any field of study. The saying goes, iron sharpens iron. I think we run the risk of becoming intellectually impotent if we don't challenge each other. If we don't say, I think what you said is not correct, and here's why. Not, I think what you said is incorrect and you're a horrible person. Or not, I think what you said is incorrect, your perspective is invalid, you don't have any right to talk about this. Those aren't arguments. That's not a conversation, and it's belittling and demeaning, and I don't think anyone really wants to exist in a profession long term that is that way. So iron sharpens iron, which means we do no good when we only smile and nod. So there's two sides to that coin. We do no good when we dismiss and belittle and insult. We do no good when we simply keep on scrolling either. Meaning, maybe you see a conversation going on a social media page, and you have an opinion about it that could be delivered in a kind way that doesn't assume the ineptitude of the person you're speaking with, but you think, was it really even worth it? If I jump into the conversation, somebody's going to think I'm a wrong thinker, in whatever capacity that is. And I think that's a dangerous culture. And it's not a choral culture, I think we all know. It's an epidemic of massive proportion across the entire planet, and it's due to social media and how we are not seeming to be able to have face-to-face conversations, because it's my theory, it's become easier to have conversations that are typed into a box where you can't see the humanity of the other person and you just hit send. And we all know it sucks. So the purpose of this show is that on a podcast, you can talk about a topic without feeling like you have to get your gotcha point in real fast, right? You can ask a question, and then if the person doesn't want to answer it, you can ask it again. and which drives the conversation forward, and that's a really important thing. So in an effort to do this, I'm going to lay out my core principles for this show. These are the things that will drive the philosophy of how the show is made, how topics are chosen, and how conversations will be held on the show. That allows you, as the listener, to decide if this is something that you want to participate in. And so you'll know going forward, in more explicit detail than I've ever offered before, what is driving my mindset on this show. Number one, knowledge and truth that are shareable by everyone are not only possible, but they are worthy goals. Some would suggest that we cannot really know anything, and that nothing is really true, and our only way of knowing is through our socialized minds, which with biases that we cannot escape. I disagree with that, although I will say that it's partially true. It's a very popular way of looking at the world. It is partially true, but it's not because, in my opinion, because of the way we're socialized. I think it's partially true. The part that's true is that no one person knows everything. Therefore, no one person can contain all of the truth about something. We need each other for that. We need, and that goes back to the iron sharpening iron thing. Without bouncing our ideas off of each other, we can't have any knowledge that they might be true. So each person holds some part of the story. And some part of the story that you don't know, because no two people look at the world through the same eyes. There is no such thing as a collective way of experiencing the world. The only way we can experience anything about what our neighbor, our friend, our foe, how they experience the world is through a conversation in some way, some kind of media written down and speaking, but we can't experience it directly. And it is precisely because we all see things differently that we must have conversations. We have to talk about things. We have to. It is only through challenging each other's perceptions that we can discover that tiny bit of truth that each person possesses and then synthesize it into one bigger axiom of truth. So on this show, we will talk. Sometimes, again, if it's a less benign topic, we will agree or we will disagree and pursue knowledge and truth as the ideal. If both or multiple, I'd like to do sometimes conversations where multiple people are kind of going at their opinions. As long as everyone has that goal that, like, hey, we're trying to mingle our minds in this conversation to arrive at some truth that none of us had going in. Because we all know something. Everyone in that conversation will know something that the other person doesn't know. And so I think the goal of any good conversation is to arrive at that. It's the little nugget that we hope to be able to share with you all as we talk. We will speak as if there is no such thing as a two-sided issue. This is something that is a pet peeve of mine. I don't know how many times you get on a Facebook conversation and see somebody very casually referencing a two-sided story. Like, there's two sides to every story. It's a common expression. I hate that expression because it implies that there are two sides to things. And I think that anything that is interesting or anything that's worth talking about should be thought of as an issue that has 7+ billion sides. Because that's how many people there are. There are 7+ billion sides. The world is way more complicated than a two-sided issue. Because again, back to what I was saying before, none of us look at the world through the same eyes. So I think, again, we're trying to distill all of those conversations into some nugget of truth. So the second core principle of the show, I believe that people have good intentions. And I believe that wholeheartedly until they prove me wrong. And when I say prove me wrong, I don't mean that they have an opinion that I find very problematic or troublesome. I don't mean they think something about the world that I feel I have proven to be not true. I don't mean that. I mean that you prove to me that you don't have good intentions by explicitly saying, I wish ill on this group of people or that group of people, or I don't like that person. I hope that that person goes to the bad place or whatever. And you start saying mean things about someone. At that point, I will probably consider you a bad actor in the conversation and probably lose respect for you, have maybe a lowered opinion of you. But up until that point, and this is not, I'm not blowing smoke, this is how I approach people. Every time I walked up to the conversation to start, I assume that that person has good intentions and that the conversation we're about to have, whatever it's about, the weather or whatever, is in good faith. I like to avoid assuming the worst about someone. And I know that even if someone holds a diametrically opposed opinion to mine, I know that they are probably a person who wants what's best for the world. They're a person who loves their children. They love their spouse, their students, etc., just like I do. Because we are fellow humans. And if the conversations start that way, I've found that even if that's not reciprocated immediately, at least I'm able to walk away from that conversation feeling good about how it went because I can only control me. And I got to tell you, too, when you assume the best about people, it starts to lift a lot of weight off your chest in terms of feelings of contempt and anger and cynicism about the world. And if it turns out that I'm wrong about a person, that's okay too. Meaning, even if I've assumed that they're good and I find out later that they're bad, it cost me nothing. It cost me nothing to assume that they were good while we were having that conversation. And at the same time, I might have gotten something out of it. I might have learned something that they didn't, or that I didn't already know. So on this show, treating people with contempt will have no place. I'm gonna hope you'll hold me to this. That means scoffing, rolling my eyes, suggesting that a person's perspective on something is so beyond the pale that it doesn't deserve being talked about, doesn't deserve being rebutted even. I see those as signs of contempt. Those are signs of you are so low, your opinion makes you so low that you don't even deserve my time to talk about that. So that's something that will be prohibited on this show for my guests and for myself. That's something that it's my show. I get to decide that that's not how this show is going to go. The third one, number 3, since everyone knows something I don't, I want my guests to be happy with their chance to get their point across. They're guests, and I would like to treat them in such a way that they feel like they had their chance to articulate what it was that they wanted to articulate. I'm even okay having them come back the day later and say, my memory of that conversation was I might have sounded like an idiot. Can we retape that? Or could I add something? It's the beauty of editing software. I can do that too. I want the people who talk to you, the listener on the show, and me, to feel like they were in a safe and open conversation. So there will be no timed questions, no gotcha questions. If I ask a question, I genuinely want to know what that person has to think about it. And of course, by extension, I want you to know genuinely what their position is on a particular topic. That being said, I will rarely do interviews. Hey, I'm not a journalist, so I'm not going to do Diane Sawyer and ask a question and sit there and let the question be whatever it's going to be, and then I'll smile politely and move on. And it's going to be a dialogue. My opinions and analysis will be very much a part of the show, or else again it stops being an interview. Stops being a conversation and starts being an interview. It's one of my biggest pet peeves about the news. Is a question will be asked from a rhetorical standpoint. So if you've studied rhetoric, this would drive you nuts. But the question gets asked, usually a politician. They don't respond to the question. They just say other things. We call them talking points. People call them talking points. And then the journalist does nothing after that. They just move on to the next question. So, Senator so-and-so, what color is the sky today? Yesterday, I fed my dog a piece of chicken. Well, that didn't answer the question. That was a dumb example, but you get the idea. They wanted to talk about their dog and the chicken before they even came in, and so they just take whatever question it is and just go wherever we go. So I see interviews that way. That's how I think of an interview. Probably I'm jaded a little bit because of television news, but I hate interviews. Don't want to do interviews. I want to have conversations. Number 4, I will strive to avoid logical fallacies. But no one is perfect. That again is not a high horse. I am guilty of logical fallacies. Everyone is. I think that's one of the first steps to being a better logician is when you, as a person, start to admit, and it's taken me quite a while. When I was 25, I was 100% sure that every position that I held was correct. Now, I don't. I choose to not think of it that way, meaning every position that I come across, I assume it's wrong. I assume that I've got it wrong and I'm missing a perspective, and I try to shoot holes in it. And I want other people to shoot holes in it because, again, iron sharpens iron. So I will commit logical fallacies because I'm human and because that's how our brains are built. The cognitive dissonance, confirmation bias, those are very hard to overcome, but they are overcomable, usually through conversation. They're very, very hard to overcome by yourself. It's when you think of it this way, proofreading your own paper. It's almost impossible because as you're reading the paper, your subconscious is filling in all the things you should have done. And so you see it as it should be because it's coming from your own mind. What is the first thing you do when you want it to be proofread? You hand it off to someone else because they're not you. They will see all of the holes in your problem. So again, the point of this show is to create a venue for that. So in terms of logical fallacies, the big no-nos, the big no-nos, and these are ones that I've worked really hard to get rid of in my conversations with people. And so I feel pretty confident that I can avoid them, but I will hold my guests to this. The big no-nos are going to be ad hominem, which means an argument that goes to the character of a person, and straw man arguments. So straw man being the idea that a person makes a claim and then the other person responds asking them to defend a claim that is not the one that was made. So this is something, if you're not familiar with the concept, most of you probably are, but if you're not familiar with it, that's something that would be easy to Google with lots and lots of examples. People are way more familiar usually with ad hominem or personal attacks, right? But ad hominem is specifically, in terms of a logical fallacy, is not necessarily that it's an attack, it's that I'm going to make an argument that is proven true or false based on something about the person that is making the argument. So my favorite example of this, I'm going to go heavy. I'm going to go heavy. It's a Hitler example because people like to compare things to Hitler because it's so extreme, right? It's so extreme. But here's this again will be my opinion, but I think it's still a good example. I've seen paintings that Hitler did. I don't think they're very good. Now, I'm not an art expert. I'm not somebody who has studied the mechanics of painting, but I see it. I've seen pictures of recreations of his artwork, his paintings, that to me look very infantile. They don't look like he's a master artist, like when I look at Monet or Van Gogh or any of those folks, and I don't know any modern artist names. It's not a genre that I follow. But when I look at Hitler's paintings, I don't see anything that impresses me. And so to understand ad hominem in this situation would be to say, Hitler was a really evil guy. Therefore, he sucks at painting. That's an ad hominem. Okay. Instead, if I want to make an argument about his painting ability, then I should be addressing the painting itself. Not the things that he has done outside of when he puts the paintbrush down and goes and kills millions of people or whatever. That's where his evil lies, and that's where his ineptitude as a human lies. But when he picks up the paintbrush, his ineptitude is in the paintbrush. It's in his ability to paint or use shading or perspective or all the technical things that artists learn how to do. And so what we will avoid on this show is ad hominem attacks. You are wrong, ad hominem fallacies, really. You are wrong because of who you are. You are wrong because of something you said earlier. You are wrong because you're mean. You know, none of those things are productive, and they simply take the conversation that's going this way and that goes somewhere else. That's a waste of your time. So I'm not interested in this platform being used to impugn anyone's character, anyone's talent, anyone's ability. I will also try very hard to understand someone's position by asking very pointed and precise questions when necessary. I don't want to force someone to defend that straw man. And so again, hold me accountable to that if you feel like I did it. I want to be able to reflect on each episode if you feel like there's something that didn't belong. So one of the things that excites me about this show is its potential to be a platform that promotes the profession as an academic discipline. We've been an art form for a long, long time. We've been an academic discipline for less time. And my evidence for that is the fact that we still have to explain to people that we're an academic discipline. If you are well, let's take philosophy itself as an example. Philosophy has been taught in university, in the academy, for hundreds and hundreds of years. Not in the same way, at least in a lot of Western cultures and civilizations, that music has been. Music lived outside of the academy in a lot of ways. It was, in the church. A lot of the education was formed in the church. And then in the U.S., we've treated music education as an art, meaning that it's completely subjective and you have no ability to make value judgments or quality judgments if it's completely subjective. I'm of the mind that it's an art and an academic study. It's both, which why not have both, right? Both is always better. And so I think we're relatively young as a profession in thinking of ourselves as academics. I actually don't think of myself as an academic because I haven't been in the college environment since 2007. So I'm far removed from that way of thinking, but I'm very much a self-driven learner. I've been studying ever since college. In fact, I always say that my studying really started after college. That's when I started really thirsting for knowledge and reading and understanding and trying to get to the bottom of things that I find interesting. So that's the kind of the point of the show. This is a very non-academic way of discussing things that I think are at their core academic. So I hope these discussions serve as a sharpening tool for you as you listen. And as always, keep the feedback coming, even if you think I'm wrong.